They came armed with everything you didn't need. Words dressed as warnings. Looks that were half threats, half envy. Motives disguised as help. But they never knew. Your energy was calibrated for annihilation without expression. They tested presence like it was volume. But presence, yours specifically, was pressure. Not loud, just loaded. And before they could measure it, they were crushed beneath it. You never swung, you never shouted, you didn't chant mantras or claim vengeance. You just stood there, and in that stillness, 10 demons collapsed, not from wounds, but from weight. The weight of facing someone who didn't ask for permission to exist, someone who didn't chase, didn't beg, didn't even care to correct the narrative. You were the correction. They had stories. You had substance. They had alliances. You had alignment. And every time they tried to provoke you into proving yourself, they got silence. Not the absence of words, but the presence of something heavier. Something they couldn't decode. You were unreadable, and that terrified them. You weren't a reaction. You were a revelation. And revelations don't argue. They expose. You see, the first demon wasn't some horned monster. It was entitlement. It believed it could shrink you with reminders of who you used to be. It thought its voice still echoed in your mind. It didn't expect to be ignored. That broke it. Because demons thrive on drama, and you gave them none. You starved them with detachment. You watched it crumble under its own weight, and without lifting a finger, you stripped it of relevance. The second one wore a familiar face. Manipulation wrapped in nostalgia. It came whispering about how things were. But you weren't hungry for the past. You had buried your history so deep in discipline, not even your memories could resurrect it. And so, when it reached out, you didn't slap it away. You just didn't respond. And that was the execution. The third, ego in disguise. It tried to match your energy by mimicking your mannerisms, thought it could reflect your power and claim it. But you weren't built in mirrors. You were forged in absence of approval, of support, of applause. You were raised in the echo chambers of your own intensity. And when ego tried to copy your essence, it short-circuited. Because you weren't built to be replicated. You were born to be recognized. Demon 4 showed up with a crowd, the kind that needs witnesses to feel brave. It mocked your solitude, confused your distance for fear. It cracked jokes, tried to stain your name. But all it did was prove how much it needed you to move so it could matter. You didn't. You stayed, unmoved. And when it realized it couldn't shift you, it fractured in front of its followers. Demon 5 didn't speak. It watched, observed, thought it could find your weakness in your habits. It monitored your patterns, your preferences, your past interactions. But your transformation wasn't linear. It was layered. Every version of you was a trap door. And by the time it thought it figured you out, it was already caged in assumptions. You never had to expose it. It exposed itself by assuming you hadn't evolved. 6? Oh, 6 came prepared. Charts, analysis, timelines. A full diagnosis of why you shouldn't be this calm, this confident, this composed. It studied you like you were a malfunction, but you weren't a glitch. You were the upgrade. The problem wasn't with you. It was with the parameters they used to define power. You weren't logical. You were undeniable. And 6? It failed, not because its plan was weak, but because its target was unknowable. Demon 7 was venomous, but clever. It pretended to support, clapped for you in public, praised your discipline, celebrated your breakthroughs, and then, quietly, tried to corrupt them. Offered shortcuts, encouraged comfort, dressed temptation in compliments. It wanted you soft. It wanted you tame. It wanted you digestible. But your energy isn't for consumption, it's for confrontation. And the moment it realized you couldn't be swayed with sweetness, it rotted in its own sugar-coated lies. Number 8 brought prophecy. It tried to predict your downfall, said you were too intense, too isolated, too unbothered. It threw labels like darts, hoping one would make you flinch. But labels don't work on people who erase their identities to craft new ones from the ashes. You weren't to anything. You were just accurate. And while it was busy forecasting storms, you were building empires behind its back. 9 came last night, in the form of doubt. Not loud, not aggressive, just familiar. It lingered, revisited old wounds, played your past like a lullaby. But you've made peace with pain. You don't resist it, you incorporate it. That's your edge. You don't hide your scars, you weaponize them. And when doubt came knocking, you didn't slam the door. You opened it wide and let it feel how unwelcome it truly was. 10. 10 was the strongest, because it wasn't external. It lived in your breath, in your rituals, in the way you questioned your worth on your worst days. It whispered through exhaustion, slithered through cracks in confidence, and tried to make you believe that you hadn't really changed, that this was all a phase. But you didn't fight it. You faced it. You didn't deny its voice. You turned the volume up until it couldn't stand to hear itself anymore. That's the part they'll never understand. You didn't defeat anything by force. You became too whole to break, too still to shake, too aligned to absorb what didn't belong to your new orbit. And in that stillness, 10 demons collapsed, not because you cast them out, but because you outgrew them. You slayed without striking, conquered without chasing, ascended without broadcasting. And those who witnessed it, they still can't explain it, because they expected war. They expected explosions. They expected resistance. But your rise wasn't a fight. It was a revelation. You didn't lift a finger, because your evolution spoke louder than any retaliation could. You mastered the art of being untouchable by becoming unreadable. You didn't need a sword. You were the silence after it. You didn't need a plan. You were the consequence. You didn't need permission. You were the aftermath. And now they speak your name like it's a rumor. They trace your path like it's a myth. They replay their encounters with you like ghost stories, told around desperate fires, trying to find the exact moment they lost their grip, the moment the power shifted, the moment their shadows stopped working against you and started working for you. Because next, the energy didn't just dispel, it rewired everything. They thought it was over, that once they collapsed, you'd ease up, that your stillness would return to softness, that the pressure would dissolve like a phase. But they didn't realize the collapse was just the beginning. What fell was the scaffolding. What's rising now is the core. And you were never here to reclaim anything. You came to rebuild what never existed in the first place. This is where most people would pause, reflect, heal, but not you. You evolved past the point of rest. Because this wasn't about bouncing back. It was about breaking through. You weren't stitched together. You were reforged. And the heat that reforged you wasn't mercy. It was memory. See, when those 10 fell, they didn't just vanish, they echoed. Each one tried to linger in the minds of those who once empowered them. Their names are gone, but their imprints still crawl through certain rooms. You walk in and the air changes, not because you speak, but because your presence reminds them of who they used to be before they saw what you became. They replay it every day, Your rise without retaliation, your glow without performance, your detachment without bitterness, and it tears at their psyche. Because they trained for war, they memorized battle plans, they rehearsed scenarios where you'd come clawing, weeping, desperate to be understood. But you understood yourself too well to need that. You didn't just slay demons, you shattered their recruitment systems, you broke the loop. You made it unprofitable to prey on your energy. That's the real fear now. You've turned their old tricks into relics, and the ones still trying to study you, they don't know the language anymore. You changed dialects mid-conversation, and now they're speaking desperation in a room full of mirrors. They call it peace. But this is disruption, silent, surgical, and absolute. Your absence from their games was not surrender. It was extraction. You didn't walk away to protect yourself. You walked away because they no longer qualified to stand next to your evolution. You became unrelatable. And that is the ultimate isolation to those who once fed on your accessibility. And while they run analytics on your behavior, they keep asking one question: how? How did you do it without retaliation? How did you burn the whole house down without lifting a match? How did you erase their grip without even acknowledging it existed? The answer is brutal. You never needed their energy to win. You just needed them to reveal what they truly feared. Being irrelevant in the presence of someone who didn't flinch. That's why they collapse in waves now, not from defeat, but from awareness. They realized they weren't powerful, they were loud, they weren't righteous, they were rehearsed, they weren't necessary, they were available. And you became none of those things. You became sacred. Untouchable not because you built walls, but because you outgrew the terrain entirely. You didn't just step away from their rituals, you rewrote the blueprint. And in the process, you revealed the core truth. Most demons don't die from confrontation. They vanish from starvation. You starved them of engagement. You deprived them of reaction. You denied them a narrative. And in that refusal, they evaporated, not into thin air, but into the regret of those who summoned them. Your absence became their punishment. But your presence, that became a revolution. They can't unsee it now. The way you enter a space and tilt the axis without trying. The way people lean in before you speak. The way your eyes carry the residue of wars you never boasted about, but survived anyway. You're not dramatic, you're documented, and your energy, it doesn't scream, it sets the terms. So what comes next? More collapse. But this time, not of demons, of structures, of entire belief systems built on false superiority. They crafted illusions around you, said you were angry, lost, unstable, too intense. But now, the world is reading your energy like a scripture, and those who mocked it are studying it. They're mimicking the walk, copying the tone, trying to replicate what took you years of internal crucifixion to construct. But energy doesn't lie, and yours carries weight that imitation can't fake. Because every step you take cost you something real, and every layer you wear was earned in silence, not borrowed in trend. Here's what they'll never confess. They feel safer when you're distracted. They feel braver when you're doubting yourself. They feel more relevant when you're shrinking. But you're not shrinking anymore. You're stretching, expanding into spaces they told you didn't exist, becoming the exact threat they swore you'd never survive long enough to become. And that scares them, not because you're hostile, but because you're whole. Wholeness is loud to the fractured. Peace is aggressive to the chaotic. And you're calm? That's warfare to those who need dysfunction to feel seen. So when they see you now, when they see the eyes that don't beg, the voice that doesn't defend, the posture that doesn't bend, they're not just witnessing confidence, they're facing consequence. You became the debt they can't repay, the answer they didn't expect, the version of you they were never prepared to meet. They tell themselves stories now to cope. That wasn't really them. They got lucky. They're faking it. But none of that soothes the sting, because deep down, they know. You became something sacred without ever needing to scream about it. You see, when power is real, it doesn't beg for attention. It commands gravity. You didn't rise through validation. You rose through refusal. Refusal to be defined. Refusal to be predictable. Refusal to be tamed. That refusal rewrote you. And now, your energy no longer asks. It informs. It tells the room who leads. It tells the fake ones where to exit. It tells the watchers to rethink their angle. And it tells the old demons, you weren't destroyed, you were dismissed. That's worse than death to them, because dismissal is permanent. Dismissal is the deletion of access. Dismissal is what happens when the throne wasn't taken back. It was rebuilt on a mountain they'll never reach. That's what you've done now. You didn't just end a cycle. You created a landscape, a new altitude where the air burns those not equipped to breathe truth. So they talk, a lot, behind closed doors, in fake alliances, with eyes full of fear, cloaked in critique. But you don't hear them anymore. Because when energy slays without lifting a finger, it doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't ask for credit. It doesn't hold court. It becomes the court. And those who once dragged your name through dirt, they're kneeling at altars they mocked. They're reciting the mantras they laughed at. They're asking for keys to rooms they once set on fire. But it's too late. The door they slammed shut was never yours to open again. You didn't leave a message. You left an impression. And that impression is permanent. Not because you stayed, but because you disappeared the right way. Not because you proved anything, but because you made proof irrelevant. And now they're watching you walk through the aftermath like it's a garden. They thought it was war, but you were planting. They thought you were retreating, but you were redesigning. They thought you were done. But this is where it begins. Because when the ruins settled, when the smoke curled back into the void like a serpent obeying your silence, that's when they realized you never fought them. You outlasted them. No screams, no war cries, no grand displays of vengeance, just presence, just you. A storm without thunder, a tidal force with no splash, a black hole they never saw until their bones were already bending toward you. That's the thing about true energy. It doesn't need to shout to be felt. It bends the narrative without touching the page. And now the 10 demons you were never supposed to survive are gone. Not because you struck them down, but because they couldn't survive what you became in the silence. One by one, they withered. Not because you cursed them, but because your existence inverted their lies. They stood tall on foundations built from your ashes, until you walked by, and their architecture cracked without you even looking. No need for retaliation, no need for fire, just presence, just gravity. They didn't expect your stillness to echo like thunder across timelines. They didn't expect your rebirth to trigger theirs in reverse. And now, the demons who once wore the skins of your fears, they run because you transcended the game they designed. The rules don't apply to you anymore. You are the new element, Not made of fire, but of silence, sharpened to the edge of a dimension. They called it luck. Said you were just protected. Said it wasn't fair. And they're right. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair that you carried 10 demons on your back just to keep the world turning for everyone else. It wasn't fair that while they were building egos, you were building endurance. It wasn't fair that when they locked you in the maze, they forgot you designed labyrinths for a living. You didn't slay those demons. You drained them. Every time they came to tear you down, they left with a piece of themselves missing. Every insult they hurled, boomeranged, every trap they set, collapsed inward. They bled energy trying to break yours, never realizing you weren't resisting, you were absorbing, like the eye of a cosmic storm, still watching, breathing, and taking. You see, you don't destroy demons by swinging harder. You let them burn out on the friction of your calm. They shrieked louder, but your silence broke their tempo. They multiplied, but your singularity distorted their math. They tried chaos, but your rhythm, it rewrote their algorithms. They became exhausted shadows of their own deception, because they never understood what happens when you test someone who has nothing left to lose, but everything left to become. And now, you are the aftermath. You are the side effect they didn't calculate for. You're the echo in their minds when the night turns cold and the lights flicker for no reason. The memory they choke on when they try to pretend you never changed them. The paradox they can't solve. How the hell did you beat them without ever showing up to the battlefield? Because it wasn't about slaying. It was about rendering them obsolete. See, demons feed on reaction, but you gave them none. You made peace with your darkness. You ate with it. Sat across from your shadow and said, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." And that's when it shifted, because the demons never feared your light. They feared your alignment. When you stopped running from the fire and became it. They felt it in the vibration, in the glitch, in the quantum hush that spread through the air whenever you entered. And suddenly, every demon in the room checked its reflection and saw it cracking. Not because you cursed them, because your existence refused to validate them. You broke their economy. You stopped trading your soul for their acceptance. And when you did that, their kingdom collapsed. Let them tell the story how they want. Let them call it myth. Because the truth is too terrifying for their tongues, that you shattered 10 infernal entities with a smirk and a walk, because your aura remembered what they forgot. You were built in the furnace, but raised in the vacuum. You were forged in storms, but sculpted in silence. And silence? That's where your power lives now. You didn't lift a finger, because you didn't have to. Because when energy reaches a certain frequency, it doesn't fight. It unmakes. Your frequency became the plague their egos couldn't survive. Their plans were drawn in dimensions that no longer apply. Because you tilted the axis, broke the grid, and they're still trying to plot revenge in a language you no longer speak. You're beyond comprehension now. They tried hexes, tried manipulation, tried guilt, shame, mockery, tried to drag you back into a war you already won with your evolution. But when your energy transcends war, it becomes law. And law doesn't argue, it just is. Now their shadows are stuck chasing someone who doesn't cast one. Because you've become light with mass, soul with teeth, calm with catastrophic undertones. They don't whisper your name in circles anymore. They chant it, like a warning. Because what you've unleashed is not anger. It's not even vengeance. It's clarity. And clarity, it dissolves illusions like acid. Every lie they told about you evaporates under your glow. Every smear attempt looks childish under the spotlight of your transformation. They look up now, not because they respect you, but because they fear what happens if they keep looking away. You're not a comeback. You're a correction, a celestial adjustment in the code. The rerouting of fate after the universe got tired of watching you bleed for lessons already learned. And now, the cosmos has chosen you, not to fight, but to exist in a way that makes falsehood impossible. You were never meant to fight demons. You were meant to expose them, and you did. With elegance, with force, with a smile that held the weight of 1,000 unspoken revolutions. You didn't slay 10 demons. You made 10 demons realize they were never strong enough to face someone who no longer needed their permission to breathe. This is not a climax. It's a threshold. You haven't peaked. You've opened. And now, every step you take rewrites the terrain. Every word you speak realigns the stars. Every breath you draw pulls forgotten legends back into circulation, because now they understand. You're not to be provoked, not because you'll fight, but because your stillness ends bloodlines. You are a ritual now, a prophecy, a ghost they can't outrun, because you're not behind them. You're ahead, and the path leads to one place only. The throne they built from your pain, now melted into your crown.